There's a saying that floats around the streets of Chicago: if you see Madame Kim Ji-soo walking, cross to the other side. Not because she's cruel, but because she's powerful. The mother of one of the most feared Korean mafia bosses in the Midwest doesn't just carry wealth. She carries legacy, sharp wit, unshakable loyalty, a tongue that could slice through steel. Cross her, and you've crossed an empire. But one sweltering July afternoon, fate decided to flip the script. Madame Kim crossed paths with someone nobody saw coming. A 25-year-old black waitress named Sienna Marshall, wearing scuffed Converse, her natural curls pulled back with a scrunchie, balancing a tray of day-old pastries from the corner bakery where she worked doubles just to keep the lights on. The intersection of West Madison and Halsted was packed, cars honking, summer heat rising off the asphalt, people shouting over street vendors. Madame Kim's sleek black Escalade sat idling at the red light, window cracked open. She'd just returned from visiting her late husband's grave, a ritual she kept every month without fail. Her driver, Mr. Choi, stepped out to check why traffic wasn't moving. For just a moment, she was alone in the back seat. That's when everything went sideways. A delivery truck came barreling down the hill, brakes screaming, horn blasting. The driver had lost control. People scattered. Madame Kim looked up too late. The truck was headed straight for her open window, aimed to crush the side of the vehicle where she sat. Then a flash, a shout, hands grabbing her jacket and yanking her out of the car with a force that felt like being ripped from death itself. They hit the pavement hard. Madame Kim's hip exploded with pain. The tray Sienna had been carrying flew into the air, pastries scattering across the concrete like broken promises. Sienna Marshall gasped for air, heart hammering so loud she thought her ribs might crack. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Her apron was torn at the shoulder. Her knee was bleeding through her jeans. But she'd done it. She'd pulled this woman out of the path of destruction. The truck slammed into the Escalade with a sickening crunch. Metal folded, glass shattered like 1,000 diamonds exploding. People screamed. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. Madame Kim stared at the wreckage, her chest heaving. If she'd stayed in that seat for one more second, she'd be dead. She turned to look at the young woman beside her, trembling but steady. You pulled me out." Sienna nodded, still panting. "I saw it coming. You didn't move. I reacted." No hesitation, no fear, no calculation about who this woman was or what saving her might mean, just pure instinct and heart. Madame Kim's throat tightened. This girl, this stranger, this waitress with flour dust on her shirt had just thrown herself into danger to save an old woman she didn't even know. Sirens wailed in the distance. Men in dark suits appeared from nowhere, phones pressed to their ears, barking orders in Korean and English. And through the chaos, a black motorcycle roared up to the scene. The man who dismounted made half the block go silent. Kang Min-jae, the Korean Mafia prince, Madame Kim's only son. Tall, sharp features, eyes like cold steel, the kind of man who commanded fear without raising his voice. He sprinted to his mother, panic cutting through his usual composure. "Ioma, are you hurt? What happened?" She pointed to Sienna, still sitting on the curb, catching her breath. "That girl saved me." Min-jae turned. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Sienna sat there holding her scraped knee, curls falling loose from her scrunchy, bakery apron covered in dust and gravel. A random waitress who just stumbled into a world she had no business being part of. "You?" he asked, his voice low. She blinked up at him. "Yeah, me." His eyes dropped to her bleeding knee. His jaw clenched. "You're injured." "I'm good," she said quickly. "It's nothing." "You're bleeding." "It's just a scrape, seriously." People were staring now, whispering. The Mafia prince speaking to a black waitress like she mattered, like she was someone. Min-jae crouched down, taking her wrist gently, examining the cuts on her palm. "Get her cleaned up," he ordered one of his men. Sienna pulled her hand back. No, really, I'm fine. I need to get back to work. Work? He looked at her like she just said she needed to fly to the moon. You just saved my mother's life. You're not going back to that bakery. Sienna tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Sir, somebody's got to serve coffee. Madame Kim let out a breathless, emotional laugh. Min Jae, she whispered to her son. She reminds me of someone. He frowned. Who? His mother didn't answer. She was staring at Sienna with a softness nobody in Chicago had seen from her in years. Emergency crews arrived. Mafia soldiers formed a perimeter. News vans pulled up, cameras rolling. But Madame Kim wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was focused entirely on Sienna, on her scraped hands, her trembling shoulders, her kind, terrified eyes. Child, she said softly, what's your name? Sienna Marshall. Are you always this reckless? Sienna flushed. I didn't want you to get hurt. That truck was coming too fast. Madame Kim nodded slowly. So you threw yourself toward danger for a stranger? You're not a stranger, Sienna said gently. You're somebody's mother. Min Jae inhaled sharply. Something tugged at him. Something he didn't understand yet. Something that made his carefully controlled world feel suddenly unstable. Madame Kim placed a weathered hand on Sienna's cheek. My son is very lucky, she murmured. Sienna frowned, confused. Lucky? Why? And then, right there on a broken Chicago street with smoke rising from the crushed Escalade and half the city watching, Madame Kim spoke the words that would change everything. Because from today you are my daughter-in-law. The crowd gasped. Phones dropped. Min Jae choked on air. Sienna's soul left her body. What? Sienna's voice barely worked. Madame Kim squeezed Sienna's hands firmly. You saved my life. That makes you family. Fate chose you. I accept you. Min Jae stared at his mother, completely stunned. You can't just... Quiet, she snapped. This is the girl. I feel it. I know it. Don't argue with your mother. But I said don't argue. Everyone stood frozen while Madame Kim nodded proudly like she'd just solved world peace. Sienna's voice trembled. Ma'am, I didn't save you to get married or anything. I saved you because it was right. Madame Kim touched her cheek again, even softer this time. Child, you did more for me today than people who call themselves family. Her eyes glistened. I thought my life was ending today, but perhaps it was just beginning. Min Jae pulled his mother aside, lowering his voice. Yama, you can't force someone into this. I'm not forcing, she hissed back. I'm declaring. There's a difference. She barely knows us. I know enough, Madame Kim snapped. I saw the way you looked at her. I didn't look... Min Jae, she said slowly. Don't lie to your mother. He shut his mouth, because she was right. When he first saw Sienna sitting there on the pavement, something had flickered inside him. A crack in the ice. A thaw he didn't want to admit. Something he had no words for yet. His mother saw everything, every unspoken thing. She is the one, Madame Kim whispered. The one who brings warmth back into this cursed bloodline. Min Jae's chest tightened. He didn't believe in fate, but the way Sienna had looked at him, fearless yet confused, soft-hearted in a hard world, that did something to him he couldn't name. Sienna tried to slip away quietly, but Madame Kim grabbed her hand. You're coming with us. Ma'am, I really have to get back to the bakery. No, you are family now. I'm not. I mean, we're not. Madame Kim smiled. Not yet. Sienna nearly fainted. Min Jae pinched the bridge of his nose. She's scared. Then comfort her, his mother ordered. Min Jae wasn't used to comforting anyone. But he walked over to Sienna, his voice dropping lower, gentler than he'd ever spoken to anyone outside family. You don't have to come with us, he said. "My mother moves fast." Sienna let out a nervous laugh. "That's putting it mildly. But," he added quietly, "I'd like to thank you properly. At least let us take care of your injuries." She hesitated. His eyes were warm. Not cold mafia boss, not intimidating crime lord, just human. And for some reason she couldn't explain, she trusted that look. "Okay," Sienna said, "but only for the injuries." Madame Kim smirked knowingly. "We'll see about that." Min-jae groaned internally. Fate had arrived wearing a bakery apron and Converse, and the Chicago underworld had no idea what storm was coming. Sienna had never been inside a car this expensive. The leather smelled brand new. The air conditioning was perfect. The windows tinted the city into something distant and dreamlike. She clutched the first aid kit they'd given her and watched the Chicago skyline roll past. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. Min-jae sat beside her, suit jacket off now, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms lined with tension. He looked less like a crime prince and more like an exhausted man in his early 30s who'd forgotten how to breathe easy. Madame Kim sat in front, refusing to let anyone else take the passenger seat. She kept turning around to check on Sienna like an overprotective aunt. "You look pale," she said. "Are you hurt anywhere else? Back? Neck? Head?" "I'm okay, Mom," Sienna replied softly. "Just scraped up." "Yoma," Min-jae sighed. "You're more injured than she is, and you're interrogating her." "Because she matters," Madame Kim shot back. "You can handle pain. She shouldn't have to." She said it like it was fact, like Sienna already belonged to her. Sienna hugged the kit tighter. "Really, I'm fine," she repeated. "And you will eat," Madame Kim cut in. "At our home." Sienna jolted. "Home?" Min-jae met her eyes. "You don't have to stay long, just until you're comfortable." Comfortable? She didn't even know what that word meant anymore. The car turned off Michigan Avenue and headed north, climbing into a neighborhood Sienna had only seen in movies. Tall iron gates, stone walls, security cameras hidden among perfectly trimmed hedges. At the top of the hill, massive gates opened with a quiet hum, revealing an estate that made her breath catch. It wasn't just a house. It wasn't even just a mansion. It was a compound. Traditional Korean architecture blended seamlessly with modern glass and steel. Stone lanterns hung beneath wooden beams. A central courtyard wrapped around an ancient tree that looked older than the city itself. Men in dark suits moved quietly near the entrance, bowing as the car rolled in. Sienna's throat went dry. "This is where you live?" "Yes," Madame Kim replied proudly. "You'll get used to it." Min-jae coughed. "Yama." She ignored him completely. The moment Sienna stepped out of the car, the air changed. Men paused mid-step. Their eyes flicked to her, curious, cautious, confused. She didn't fit here in her torn jeans, scuffed sneakers and flour-stained apron. Good. She hadn't come here to fit in. She'd come to leave as soon as she could politely escape. "Don't stare," Min-jae said calmly to his men. "She's a guest." The way he said guest sounded heavier, like it meant something more. The men bowed their heads and turned away immediately. "You command them like that?" Sienna whispered. "They work for me," he said simply. "And who do you work for?" He paused. For the first time, the answer felt complicated. "Family," he replied eventually. She held his gaze a second longer than she should have. Then a woman in her 50s, hair tied neatly in a bun, approached and bowed. "Madame, young master, welcome back." "Mrs. Han." Madame Kim smiled warmly. "This is Sienna. She saved my life. Treat her as if she's blood. Better than blood." Sienna nearly dropped the first aid kit. Mrs. Han's eyes widened briefly, then softened with understanding. "Of course," she said. "Come inside, Miss Sienna." "Just Sienna," she said weakly. Inside, everything gleamed with the quiet polish of old money. Family portraits, antique vases, carved wood panels, the kind of home built on generations and guarded by secrets deeper than Lake Michigan. They led her to a small sitting room overlooking the courtyard. Sliding paper doors, low table, silk cushions. It should have been intimidating. But someone had left half-finished embroidery on the side table, a blanket folded imperfectly on the chair, an open book face down on a cushion. This space was lived in. "Sit," Madame Kim said, easing herself down with a wince. "Min-jae, the kit." He reached for Sienna's elbow gently, turning her arm toward the light. "This might sting," he murmured. Her breath caught. "Honestly, I've burned myself on the espresso machine worse than this." He gave the smallest smile. Then he cleaned the wound with precise, gentle movements. Hands that had probably broken bones now tending to scraped skin like it was the most delicate thing in the world. Madame Kim watched them carefully. Her son, who rarely let anyone close. This girl who'd walked into death for a stranger. Her mind was already made up. "Where is your family, Sienna?" she asked. Sienna glanced up, a little startled by the softness in her tone. "My mom works 2 jobs, she said. "My younger brother Malik is trying to finish community college. We don't have much, but we have each other." "And your father?" "Gone," she said simply. "Has been for a long time." Madame Kim's eyes flickered with deep understanding. "My husband is gone too," she said quietly. "Men leave through death or choice, but we women stay and hold what remains together." Sienna looked at her differently then, not as just the fearsome Mafia queen, but as a woman who had lost everything and kept walking forward anyway. After Min-jae finished bandaging her elbow, Mrs. Han brought out food so quickly that Sienna wondered if they'd been preparing a feast on standby. Kimchi, japchae, grilled mackerel, perfectly steamed rice, soup that smelled like comfort, little plates of banchan that were almost too beautiful to touch. Sienna's eyes widened. "I can't eat all this," she protested. "You won't," Madame Kim said. "We will. Together." Min-jae sat across from her. This time there was no chaos, no accident, no crowd, just a low table and the awkward silence of 2 people who'd shared a disaster, and nothing else. "Try this," Madame Kim urged, placing food on Sienna's plate. "You need your strength. You saved not just me today, but my son's future." Sienna blinked. "His future." "If I had died," she said bluntly, "my enemies would smell weakness immediately. They would come for him within days. You prevented that." Sienna's stomach twisted. She hadn't thought about it like that. "I just saw a truck," she said quietly. "I moved. Anyone would have done the same." "No." Min-jae spoke for the first time in a while. "Most people freeze, or scream, or film it on their phones." Their eyes locked across the table. She looked away first, cheeks warming. "Then I'm glad I didn't freeze," she said softly. He nodded once. "So am I." The way he said it, simple and sincere, warmed her more than the soup. After they ate, Madame Kim insisted on walking Sienna to the front entrance. "You will come back," she said. Not a question, a statement. "I need to properly thank your mother and brother too." "That's not necessary." "It is," her voice softened. "I want to meet the people who raised the woman who saved my life." Sienna's chest tightened. It had been a long time since anyone spoke about her family with that kind of respect. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll come." "Good." Madame Kim smiled in a way that made her look 10 years younger. "Then we can begin planning the wedding." Sienna nearly choked. "Wedding?" Min-jae, who'd just walked up behind them, almost dropped his car keys. "Yama!" Madame Kim waved her hand dismissively. "I'm old," she said. "I don't have time to waste. I know what I saw. You 2 have red threads tied already." Sienna held up both hands. "Ma'am, your son and I literally just met today. And he has never looked at anyone the way he looked at you when you stood bleeding on that street." she said firmly. "Don't argue with my instincts. They're never wrong." Min-jae muttered something in Korean that sounded suspiciously like a curse. Sienna's heart was beating too fast, but under the embarrassment, she couldn't lie. There was something between them. She just didn't know what to call it yet. Back at the bakery, the fluorescent lights buzzed like nothing had changed. Her manager glared as she rushed in an hour late. "You took forever. Everything okay?" "Long story," she sighed. "Very long story." She tied her apron back on, grabbed her order pad and snapped back into rhythm. But her mind was far from the grills and coffee pots. It was in that quiet room, with the low table and a woman who'd called her daughter-in-law. It was in the way a Mafia boss had held her arm like it might shatter. It was in the moment she'd heard him almost panic when he thought she was hurt. Malik was waiting for her after closing, leaning against the bus stop outside. "You good?" he asked, looking her up and down. "Physically? Yeah," she said. "Mentally? We'll see." He squinted at her. "You look like someone who just got proposed to and doesn't know it yet." She froze. "Why would you say that?" "Because there's a guy across the street who looks like he'd burn the whole south side if you jaywalked." She turned. Across the road, leaning against a black SUV, was Min-jae. He wasn't in a suit now, just dark jeans, a plain black shirt, and a stare that saw straight through excuses. He crossed the street carefully, deliberately. "Sienna," he said with a small nod. Then he looked at Malik. "You must be her brother." Malik puffed his chest a little. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Kang Min-jae." Malik's bravado shrank instantly. "The Kang. Like the Kang." Sienna groaned. "Can we not do this right now?" Min-jae almost smiled. "I came to make sure you got home safely. The men involved in the truck accident, they might not appreciate what happened today." Sienna's stomach sank. "You mean they could come after you or your mom?" "Or you," he said quietly. Malik stepped in front of her immediately. "Absolutely not," he said. "Nobody's touching her." Min-jae's gaze flicked between them, something like respect crossing his face. "Good," he said. "Then you understand why it might be safer if you both stayed at our estate for a while." "What?" Sienna's eyes widened. "It's temporary," he said. "Just until I deal with whoever tried to stage that accident." She swallowed hard. He was right. She hated that he was right. But moving into a Mafia compound wasn't exactly on her vision board between student loans and rent. "I can't just leave everything," she said. "My job." "I'll compensate your manager," he replied smoothly. "My mom, she can visit," he said. "Or I'll send a car for her daily." "My life," Sienna said, voice shaking. "I can't just pack it into a duffel bag and move into your world." He stepped closer. Not too close, but close enough that she could see the exhaustion under his eyes. "You already stepped into my world when you pulled my mother out of that car," he said. "I'm just asking you to let me make sure you survive it." That hit harder than anything else. She exhaled slowly and looked at Malik. "You trust him?" Malik asked quietly. She thought about the accident, the truck, the way Min-jae had bandaged her elbow, the way his mother had looked at her like she'd been waiting her whole life to meet her. "I don't know him," she said honestly, "but I don't feel unsafe around him." That was enough for Malik. "Fine," he said, "but if anything happens to her, I'm coming for you. Don't care who you are." Min-jae's expression flickered with ghost of amusement. "I believe you," he said. 3 days later, Sienna stood in front of the Kang estate with a single duffel bag and a racing heart. She hadn't brought much, a few outfits, her worn hoodie, a small framed photo of her mom, and Malik crammed into a photo booth, laughing with their eyes squeezed shut. She felt like an imposter. This place was marble and ancient trees and generational wealth. She was discount store fashion and bus passes. Mrs. Han greeted her at the door like she'd been expecting her all her life. "Welcome home, Sienna." Home. The word stabbed and soothed at the same time. Inside, Madame Kim was waiting in the sitting room, dressed in soft hanbok this time, hair down, looking almost gentle. "You came," she said, eyes shining with emotion. "I said I would," Sienna replied. "And you kept your word." She nodded approvingly. "Good, I like that quality." Sienna glanced around nervously. "I'm only staying until it's safe. I don't want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," Madame Kim said firmly. "You are an answer." "Answer to what?" she whispered. "To a prayer I stopped saying a long time ago." Before Sienna could respond, Min-jae appeared in the doorway. He didn't look like a Mafia boss right now, just a man who'd been pacing and finally found relief. "You're here," he said. "You sound surprised." "I'm grateful," he admitted. Their eyes met. Something quiet passed between them, unfinished, unnamed, but undeniably there. That night, Sienna lay in a guest room, bigger than her entire apartment. Soft bed, clean sheets that smelled like lavender, a view of the courtyard tree lit by stone lanterns. She couldn't sleep. Outside, she could hear faint footsteps of guards patrolling. Somewhere, a phone buzzed with urgent whispers. This house was calm on the surface, but the world it belonged to was anything but. She stepped out onto the balcony for air. Below, by the ancient tree, a lone figure stood, Min-jae. He was staring up at the sky, hands in pockets, shoulders carrying invisible weight. She watched him for a moment. Then, before she could overthink it, she whispered down, "Min-jae." He looked up immediately. She expected him to tell her to go back inside for safety. Instead, he said, "Can't sleep." "New pillow," she shrugged. "Feels like it's judging me." He huffed a soft laugh. "Come down. The tree doesn't judge." So she did. And under that old tree in the center of the Kang estate, with guards pretending not to watch and stars barely visible through city haze, a Mafia boss and a bakery waitress sat side by side, not as savior and saved, not as boss and outsider, not even as future anything, just as two people whose lives had collided in a way neither fully understood yet. "How long do you think I'll have to stay here?" she asked softly. "Until I'm sure no one will use you to hurt me," he said. She tilted her head. "People would really come after me just to get to you." "Yes." She thought about that. "Then you better stay alive," she said. He looked at her, something softening in his expression. "I intend to," he replied quietly, "now more than ever." Sienna's heart made a dangerous decision right then. It started to fall. She didn't know what this house would demand of her, what this family would turn her into, what dangers waited in the shadows of Min-jae's world. But she knew one thing. She had already been claimed as daughter-in-law in words. Now under this tree, fate had started to write the rest. For 4 days, the Kang estate pulsed with tension Sienna couldn't quite name. Guards tripled at every entrance. Phones buzzed constantly in every hallway. Min-jae disappeared into late-night meetings that went until dawn. Madame Kim kept prayer beads wrapped around her fingers, a habit she only had when something was very wrong. Sienna felt it all without anyone telling her a thing. Something had shifted in their world, and somehow she was at the center of it. It happened at dawn on the 5th day. Sienna walked downstairs for water, half asleep, hair messy, wearing a borrowed Chicago Bulls sweatshirt that swallowed her whole. She wasn't expecting to find a man in a black suit standing in the living room. He wasn't a guard she recognized. His eyes flicked to her cold and sharp, assessing every inch. "You must be the girl," he said slowly. "The girl. The reason the young master is making unusual decisions lately." Sienna's grip on her water glass tightened. He smirked. "You should be careful. Not everyone in this house thinks your presence is a blessing." Before she could respond, a voice cut through the room like ice. "Step away from her." "Min-jae, He stood at the top of the staircase, jaw clenched tight, eyes like frozen steel. The suited man bowed stiffly. "Young master, I was simply introducing myself." "No," Minjay said coldly. "You were threatening her. Try that again, and you won't be allowed inside these walls ever again." The man's eyes flickered with something dark. Then he bowed again and walked out silently. Sienna exhaled shakily. "Who was that?" "Someone who forgets his place," Minjay muttered. "He won't speak to you again. I'll make sure of it." She watched him descend the stairs, noticing the tension in every movement, the exhaustion carved into his face. "You barely slept," she whispered. "I'm working on something important." "What kind of something?" He hesitated. Then he said the last thing she expected. "The accident wasn't an accident." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "The truck was sabotaged," he said quietly. "And someone tipped them off about my mother's exact schedule that day." Sienna's pulse hammered. "You mean someone actually wanted to kill her?" "Yes." "Ugiichi to get to you?" "Yes," he repeated even more quietly. She felt the air leave her lungs. "And because I pulled her out, now they know my face." He looked at her, eyes softening in a way that broke something inside her. "That's exactly why you're here, Sienna. I need to protect you." That afternoon, Sienna found Madame Kim in the courtyard, pulling petals off flowers with unnerving calm. The older woman didn't look at her when she spoke. "They wanted me dead," she said simply, "and when they failed, they immediately looked for another weakness." She turned, eyes blazing. "You!" Sienna swallowed hard. "I didn't ask to be part of this," she whispered. "You're not just anything," Madame Kim snapped. Then softer, "You saved me. That made you family. And family is both shield and target in this world." Sienna's chest tightened. "I didn't know saving someone would lead to this." "How could you?" the older woman said more gently. "You were living your life, serving coffee, taking care of your brother. You didn't ask for this world." Sienna nodded, throat tight with unshed tears. "But fate doesn't ask permission," Madame Kim continued. "It chooses, and it chose you." "Why me?" Sienna whispered. Madame Kim touched her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Because my son looks at you the way a man looks at his first sunrise after a decade of darkness." Sienna froze completely. I didn't come here to become anything," she whispered. "I didn't come to complicate his life or put him in danger." "You saved his life too," Madame Kim cut in firmly. "More than you know yet. Hey, before we continue with this intense story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever made a split-second decision that changed everything? Maybe you helped a stranger, spoke up when it mattered, or took a chance on something that scared you. Drop a comment below telling me about that moment. And if you're enjoying Sienna's journey, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get even more complicated. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next." Sienna shook her head slowly. "I'm not strong enough for this world," she said. "This life terrifies me." Madame Kim didn't deny it. "It should terrify you. It's terrifying." Then she held Sienna's hands firmly. "But my son's world is changing because of you, and I've waited many long years to see that change happen." Sienna's voice trembled. "I'm not brave like you think I am." "Oh, child," Madame Kim whispered. "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay when everything in you screams to run." Her grip tightened, and you stayed. Sienna didn't know what broke her more, the fear of what was coming, or the way this woman made her feel like she actually mattered in a world that had always made her feel invisible. It happened when the sun began to set. Sienna stepped into the courtyard to water a small pot of herbs someone had left unattended near the kitchen door. Mrs. Han had mentioned that fresh rosemary made Min-jae smile, a rare thing. Sienna didn't know why she cared about that, but she did. As she bent to water the plant, she heard a sharp hiss, click, something metallic hitting stone. Sienna froze. A small black device rolled to a stop inches from her hand. Not a grenade, not a bomb. A tracker. Someone had just thrown a tracker into the estate grounds. But before she could scream for help, a gloved hand grabbed her shoulder roughly. She gasped as a figure yanked her backward violently. A shadow, tall, masked, moving fast, his arm locked around her waist like a vice. Before he could drag her any farther, a gunshot cracked the evening air. Bang! The masked man jerked, stumbled, then vanished into the hedge maze, dropping the tracker as he fled. Sienna fell to her knees hard, throat closing with terror. Min-jae sprinted from across the courtyard, gun still raised, eyes blazing with fury. "Sienna!" He slid beside her on the gravel, hands flying to her shoulders, her face checking for injuries. "Did he touch you? Did he hurt you? Sienna, look at me." I think he tried to take me," she gasped, shaking uncontrollably. Min-jae's face hardened into something she'd only seen in nightmares. Pure, controlled rage. Rage at himself for not being faster. Rage at the world for being this cruel. Rage at whoever dared come near her. He pulled her into his chest without hesitation. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't calculated. It was pure instinct. Raw and desperate. "You're safe," he murmured over and over into her hair. "I've got you. I'm here. You're safe now." She clung to him, fingers gripping his shirt so tight her knuckles went white, breath coming in violent shakes. Guards swarmed them within seconds. Madame Kim rushed out, eyes wide with alarm. "What happened? What?" Min-jae spoke through clenched teeth. "Someone tried to abduct her." His mother's expression changed like a storm overtaking clear sky. "Over my dead body," she said with terrifying calm. She crouched beside Sienna, cupping her face firmly. "Child, look at me." Sienna did, tears streaming down her face. Madame Kim's voice softened, but stayed dangerous. "They thought they could use you against us. They thought you were weak prey." Her eyes burned like fire. "They were wrong." Sienna trembled harder. "Why won't they just leave me alone?" she whispered. Min-jae's arms tightened protectively around her. "Because you're important to me," he said before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like lightning. Sienna's breath hitched. Madame Kim's eyebrows rose, but she smiled fiercely. "There it is," she murmured with satisfaction. "Finally." Min-jae helped Sienna to her feet carefully, guiding her inside with a protective hand on her back. "I'm taking you somewhere safer," he said firmly. "But this house isn't safe," she said weakly. "It is," he insisted. "But you're not sleeping alone tonight." She stumbled. "What?" "I'll stay outside your door," he said quickly. "I won't enter your room. I'll just make sure nothing gets within 10 feet of you." "That's not necessary." "It is necessary," he said. His tone wasn't the cold Mafia command she'd heard before. It was fear, real, raw fear of losing her. Madame Kim placed a gentle hand on her son's arm. "Min-jae," she said softly, "you can't protect her like this forever. Not alone." "I will protect her any way I must," he said. "You can't fight an entire generation of enemies by yourself." He glared at her. "Watch me try." Sienna stepped between them, her voice soft, but holding something new, courage born from sheer necessity. "Min-jae," she whispered, "you can't destroy your whole life because I got pulled into it." "You didn't get pulled into it randomly," he said sharply. "You were targeted specifically because of me." "And I'm still here," she replied quietly but firmly. He froze, staring at her. "I'm still here," she repeated with more strength, "and I'm not running away from you." Min-jae's jaw clenched, throat working hard. He'd heard gunshots without flinching. He'd faced rival bosses without blinking. He'd lost men, fought wars, buried loyal soldiers. But this, a girl from the south side looking him dead in the eye and saying she wouldn't abandon him, it made him feel something he had no name for. He reached for her hand carefully, not forcefully, not possessively, just gently, as if she was something precious he'd just realized he was allowed to want. Sienna let him hold it, her fingers curling around his. Madam Kim watched them with satisfaction, so deep it softened every line on her weathered face. "I knew it," she whispered to herself. "I knew fate brought her to us." Later that night, after the guards had quadrupled and every door was bolted and alarmed, Min-jae stood outside Sienna's room, leaning against the wall. He knew she couldn't hear him through the heavy door, but he spoke anyway to the silence. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "I promise you that." Inside, Sienna sat on the edge of the luxurious bed, hand pressed against her racing heart. She didn't know where this terrifying path was leading, but she knew this much now. She was no longer just the girl who served coffee and pastries to strangers at a corner bakery. She was now the girl a Mafia family would kill to protect, the girl someone had just tried to kidnap in broad daylight, the girl fate had chosen for something so much bigger than herself. The girl who was becoming, slowly and quietly, part of the complicated life of a man who carried an entire city's underworld on his shoulders. And tonight, lying in the darkness, she realized something she'd been too scared to admit even to herself. She didn't want to disappear from his world anymore. She wanted to stay right here, even if it terrified her to her core, even if it meant everything would change forever. The Kang estate didn't sleep for the next 72 hours. Calls flew across multiple time zones. Business deals were threatened and renegotiated. Promises were broken and remade. And through it all, one truth settled over the compound like heavy storm clouds gathering. Whoever went after Sienna had declared open war, not just on the Kangs, but on whatever softer, more hopeful future they were trying to build. Min-jae sat at the long conference table in the underground room beneath the estate. No windows, just cold fluorescent lights and colder faces staring back at him. The same man who'd called Sienna the girl now stood on the opposite side with his hands bound behind his back, lip bleeding where someone had already hit him once. "You went too far," Min-jae said, voice dangerously flat. The man scoffed despite his position. "She's just some waitress from the south side." "No," Min-jae replied with ice in his tone. "She is my mother's savior, and under this roof that makes her completely untouchable." The man scoffed again. "You've gone soft, Min-jae, over some black girl from a bakery. The whole city's watching. You're supposed to be untouchable, but now everybody knows exactly how to make you bleed." Min-jae's expression didn't change at all. "Everybody already knew I could bleed," he said calmly. "They just thought they could exploit it for their gain. That's their fatal mistake." The man leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. "You actually care about her," he said mockingly. "They'll use that reality again and again until someone finally gets to her first and finishes what we started." Min-jae's jaw tightened dangerously. "I'm well aware of the risks." "Then let me fix this mess," the man said. "Let me clean it up properly. One bullet, one quiet night, problem solved forever. No waitress, no weakness, no complications." He said it casually, like he was discussing taking out garbage. The underground room went completely silent. Min-jae didn't raise his voice. He never had to. "Repeat that," he said too quietly. "I want you to hear yourself say it again." The man swallowed hard. He'd gone too far, and he knew it now. Min-jae stood slowly, deliberately. "You think caring makes me weak?" he said. "You think loyalty is somehow a liability? You think the only way to survive in this world is to cut away anything that looks like light or hope?" He stepped closer, eyes eerily calm. Too calm. "But here's something you never understood," he continued with lethal softness. "Men who fear loss can be dangerous. Men who never had anything to lose are just reckless and stupid. But men like me, who finally found one thing they absolutely refused to lose. He smiled, cold and terrifying. We're the most dangerous of all. So he nodded to his lieutenants. Get him out of here. He doesn't work for us anymore, not in any capacity. The man went pale. You're exiling me? Minjae, I've been loyal for years. That's the merciful version of what I could do, Minjae said. Take it and leave Chicago before my mother hears exactly what you suggested. She won't be nearly as kind as I'm being right now. As the door slammed behind the disgraced subordinate, one of the younger lieutenants cleared his throat carefully. Young master, he ventured, you know the others will talk about this. Let them talk, Minjae replied firmly. Let them all know exactly what happens when someone lays a hand on what's mine. Sienna hadn't meant to eavesdrop at all. She'd only come downstairs to find Mrs. and ask for chamomile tea to help her sleep, but voices carried up from the underground stairwell, echoing through the old house. They'll keep coming for her if they think she's just a random waitress. She's what's mine. Her heart stuttered violently in her chest. She didn't hear every single word clearly, but she heard enough. Enough to know she wasn't just a footnote in his dangerous world anymore. Enough to know this war wasn't only about territory or power, it was about her now too. Footsteps approached from below. A heavy door opened. Sienna stumbled back, pressing herself flat against the hallway wall as Minjae emerged from the underground stairwell. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, expression carved from absolute stone. He almost walked past her in the dim light, then he stopped and turned slowly. You were listening, he said. It wasn't a question. She swallowed hard. Not on purpose, she said quickly. Your walls aren't exactly soundproof down there. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I didn't want you to hear it like that. Hear what exactly? She whispered. That someone suggested killing me like it was nothing. The word tasted bitter and wrong in her mouth. His eyes darkened with something painful. Yes, he said, and that I made it absolutely clear what happens to anyone who even tries. She studied his face carefully in the low light. You called me, what's mine? She said softly. Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. He could have denied it, could have brushed it off as strategic posturing, could have hidden behind the role he played for everyone else in this world. He didn't do any of that. Yes, he said simply. I did. Her stomach flipped. Am I? She whispered. Yours? His jaw flexed once. Do you want to be? He asked quietly, vulnerably. There it was. No Mafia politics, no mother's expectations, no enemies or danger. Just a man asking a woman the most important question he'd never thought he'd ask anyone. Trembling slightly, she stepped closer to him. You terrify me, she admitted honestly. I know, he said. You drag danger with you everywhere you go. I know. You make my entire life more complicated every single day. A faint, broken smile. I know that too, Sienna. She took a breath that felt exactly like jumping off a cliff into darkness. And I think, she whispered, my heart chose you the second you bandaged my elbow in that sitting room and pretended it was nothing special. Something in his carefully controlled face completely shattered. The distance, the denial, the walls, all of it crumbled. Sienna, he murmured her name like a prayer. Don't say my name like that, she said, voice shaking. Not unless you really mean it. He did. He meant every single syllable with his whole soul. He closed the last inch of space between them. His fingers brushed her jaw slowly, as if giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't move, he lowered his forehead to rest against hers gently and let the truth fall out. You're not my weakness, he whispered against her skin. You're the first thing in my entire life that makes me want to be better than the man I've been." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "That's not a small thing to say to someone." "It's the only way I know how to say what I feel," he replied. She laughed through a tear that escaped. "You're really bad at normal romance, you know that?" "I wasn't trained for anything normal," he said with the ghost of a smile. Then he kissed her. It wasn't the desperate clutch from the courtyard after the attack. It wasn't a stolen moment in the chaos. It was a promise made with lips and breath, slow, intentional, unhurried. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything except complete honesty and truth. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads still touching. "Does this make things more dangerous for both of us?" she asked breathlessly. "Definitely," he said without hesitation. She swallowed hard. "Then I guess we face it together." He smiled, slow and disbelieving, like no one had ever offered to walk beside him before in his entire life. "Together," he echoed, testing the word. "Yeah, together." Months passed like pages turning in a book written by fate itself. The city still whispered constantly about the failed assassination and the mysterious black waitress, who'd somehow become untouchable overnight. Some said the Kangs had gone dangerously soft. Others whispered they'd become more terrifying than ever before, unpredictable in their newfound protectiveness. Nobody dared touch Sienna Marshall again. Not after what happened to the men who tried. Inside the estate gates, life shifted into a new rhythm that felt almost like peace. Sienna spent mornings learning Korean from Mrs. Han, stumbling over pronunciations while they laughed together. Afternoons helping Madame Kim in the garden, learning which herbs meant what in traditional medicine. Evenings waiting for Min-jae to come home from meetings that were gradually becoming less bloody, less brutal than they used to be. He was changing, slowly but surely. He didn't step away from power overnight or abandon his responsibilities, but he started delegating more, closing unnecessary conflicts, drawing harder lines about what he would and wouldn't allow his organization to do anymore. "Why?" Sienna asked him one evening as they sat beneath the courtyard tree under soft lantern light. "Because I used to think my only legacy would be fear," he said honestly. "Now I want it to be something different, something better." "What?" she asked. He looked at her with complete sincerity. "Survival with actual dignity," he said, "for the people who depend on me, for my mother, for you." She took his hand gently. "You're not responsible for saving everyone, you know." "Maybe not everyone," he agreed, "but I'm responsible for saving you. You saved my mother. Now I save you. That's how this works." 1 year after the truck accident that changed absolutely everything, Min-jae took Sienna back to that same courtyard tree, the ancient one that had witnessed their first real conversation. Guards kept respectful distance. Madame Kim watched from her window above, hands clasped with hopeful anticipation. "Sienna Marshall," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not good with words that aren't commands or threats." She laughed softly. "I've noticed. But I need you to know something," he continued, voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "When you pulled my mother from that car, you didn't just save her life, you saved mine too. You reminded me that there's more to existence than fear and power and endless war." And tears started forming in her eyes. "Min-jae, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm asking you to marry me. Not because my mother declared it that first day, though she was right as always. Not because it's strategic or safe or expected. But because I love you, Sienna. I love your courage, your kindness, the way you see good in a world that's shown you mostly hardship. The way you make me want to be the man you seem to think I already am." He pulled out a simple ring, not flashy, not ostentatious, just beautiful and real. "So will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you stay in this complicated, dangerous, imperfect world with me?" Sienna was crying fully now, but smiling through every tear. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll stay. I already chose to stay a long time ago." He slid the ring onto her finger, with hands that shook slightly. Then he pulled her close and held her like she was the most precious thing in his entire universe. From the window above, Madame Kim wiped her own tears and smiled with deep satisfaction. Fate had been right after all. Sometimes the most unlikely collisions create the most beautiful futures. Sometimes a split-second decision to save a stranger changes absolutely everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, a bakery waitress and a mafia boss find exactly what they both needed, in the last place either expected to look: in each other. So that's Sienna and Min Jae's story, and honestly, it's got me thinking about all the unexpected ways our lives can change in a single moment. Have you ever had an experience where helping someone led to something completely unexpected? Or maybe you've made a choice that terrified you, but turned out to be exactly what you needed. I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. This community is built on sharing these real moments, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched you or made you think differently about fate and courage, hit that subscribe button and join our family. We're building something special here, and I'm so grateful you're part of it. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.